My name's Kyle Bowen. I'm the Director of Education Technology Services at Penn State. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm a really warm and fuzzy guy, so as you have any questions or ideas this morning, please feel free to just kind of blurt those out at any time. What I want to do today was talk a little bit about badges, or in particular open badges, as relates to learning, or as an influencer of learning. And we can't talk about learning without talking about symbolism. Right? These are the symbols that all of our institutions use as a way to recognize learning, right, as it happens. And the interesting part is that we all use these symbols, but yet none of us have a common definition for what they mean. Even between our institutions, there's no common understanding. Within our institutions, there's not necessarily a common understanding of what's the value of an A. Right? See, there are so many symbols around us every day that we see that suffer from the same basic challenge. Like these symbols that you find in most restrooms that provide instructions, and most believe that when you see this means that if you push the hand dryer button, it will dispense hot air, whereas others believe if you push the button, it will dispense bacon. Right? Or this symbol that many believe warns of the perils of electrocution, whereas others suggest maybe it warns of wearing leisure suits. Like that guy. He's like, anyway. Or this symbol, right, that you find on the dashboard of almost every car. And when it turns on, most drivers know that this means that your car may be leaking oil. Whereas for other confused drivers, they didn't even know their cars could leak gravy. See, because it looks like a gravy boat. You see? Okay. I know it doesn't help when you have to explain it, but you know. See, this is the same challenge we have, is that the symbols we have suffer from the same lack of definition. So that when that occurs, then our need is to differentiate based on the learning experience. And for every institution, no matter what form it takes, that learning experience is filled with nuance. And that learning experience is unique, because that's why in most cases the institution was formed to begin with. But most institutions give you a transcript. So when I graduated from Purdue, they gave me a transcript like this that articulated all of my quote-unquote learning. It was a listing of every course that I had taken and a grade to go along with it. And every time I look at it, I can't help but be struck by how it resembles one of these. Right? Now, strangely enough, Purdue's return policy is much more strict than Walmart's. A receipt's not enough to get a return on your education. But it's based on the same idea, that these were the things you bought and how you and what you took away from that experience. But what we're finding is that there's a change in terms of what these experiences are. Like, learning isn't just courses anymore. Learning has all kinds of different forms. And what we need is something that can help us capture and recognize learning in all of its forms. And that's the opportunity that we see with badges, right? Is that it provides us a basic framework from which we can recognize learning for the student, no matter how they chose to collect it. Now, if you're not familiar with badges, they have a basic anatomy to them, right? The badge is just the symbol, the graphic that most of us see or recognize. So when we think about a badge, we think about that symbol. But as we talked about before, symbols have their problems, right? That they lack definition. So what a badge does, in particular open badges, is that it provides a set of data, metadata, or information about that badge that describes who issued it, who it was issued to, what they had to do to get it, and evidence related to their learning, in addition to a number of other pieces of information. This makes it possible to make that credential interchangeable. Now, Mozilla was one of the original champions of the Open Badges framework. They specified kind of this metadata framework that all of us can use as a way to kind of deliver and push these badges. And so it makes it possible for us as issuers of badges, so people who award them, it enables our students to display them right? So that means that they can take badges earned from multiple different places for multiple different things and collect them together and display them in their own context, right? Unlike a transcript, for example, where you can't really intermix your transcript with other certificates or other transcripts, right? In this case, you can create your own picture of yourself. The student can create their own demonstration of their learning. But the key piece of badges is really in their evidence, right? It's that classic iceberg concept where really the part you see is just the smallest piece. In reality, badges have absolutely almost nothing to do with badges and have everything to do with evidence. Because evidence captures nuance. We all know this is true. Take, for example, this professor. This is Dr. Negichi. He won the 2012 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. You can take sophomore organic chemistry from him, right? So you can learn chemistry from a Nobel Prize winner. And on your transcript, it will be recognized like that, right? Now, if you took my course on public speaking, it looks like that. That is the closest I will ever come to looking like a Nobel Prize winner, right? These types of experiences have nuance in them, and historically we've had no way to recognize that. And that's the value of these kinds of credentials, is that not only do they mention what was learned, but it also talks about the context in which it was learned. You learned it from a Nobel Prize winner. That has value. Another instructional aspect of badges that we can look at is dealing with motivation, right? Now, this is a bit of a slippery slope because most people think, well, if I just award these badges en masse, then people will just be super motivated to learn and then they'll just go out there and learn like crazy. Great, we've solved it. We've solved learning, right? Not so much. In reality, badges equal goals, right? Badges are instructional goals at their base level, and they follow very similar archetypes. That we have participation badges that begin to recognize achievement. And we also have skill-based badges that begin to recognize mastery. And when used in combination, these are the elements of motivation, right? It's not to say that one is better or one is worse. It's about applying them correctly in the right circumstance. This is our future area of research. What are the right combinations to use these? There's been existing research about how to combine these types of learning goals in order to motivate students, so we can use these same types of, or apply the same type of thinking to the use of badges. Because what we want to avoid is this notion of carpet badging, right? That we will just badge en masse. We'll just hand badges to everyone who wants one in all different forms as in an effort to try and motivate. But that has, again, the more you do that, the less value it has. It has the same problem that the A has. It's like we've awarded it so many times we can't agree on its value, so what is its value now? Well, it's whatever you decide you want it to be. Another element dealing with badges is around choice, right? So what we can begin to do are lay out these kind of flexible paths for students to pursue learning in the way that they want. This is the kind of choose your own adventure model for learning. What we have today is a course that exists on a course clock, right? 15, 16 weeks, something in that neighborhood. And really, this is a race for the student. It's a race for the student to say, okay, here's the topic I want you to learn, and I'm going to give you 16 weeks to do it in. And if you can't do it in 16 weeks, then that's just your problem, right? And we award them a grade at the end. But really what we should be thinking about is how do we make it such that at the end of the 16 weeks, it's not the end. It's not the way of saying, look, this you just earn a C and that's what you got to live with, but rather you're at a C now, here's how you progress to continue to develop inside of this space. What we can do is begin to move away from this idea of this kind of one-night stand of learning, right? This, we'll learn them and leave them. They'll just turn off that spigot when the course is done. That we can begin to think about what is the kind of lifelong trajectory of the student and how do we help them continue to learn and find their own path, such that we can use our courses as ways to feed into all of the learning outcomes that we want our students to have, no matter where those outcomes may choose to exist. Right? They may exist. You may have critical thinking outcomes or writing outcomes or speaking outcomes that occur in multiple different courses that you can begin to combine together and recognize. And I'll show some examples of that in just a minute. Another key aspect when we begin to talk about open badges is around their versatility. And that's really part of the real value here, is that, again, we want to be able to recognize learning really in all of its forms. So that means that we need something that's easily adaptable. And here are a couple of examples of different applications of badges in different contexts. So for example, we have this. These are curricular badges. These were badges used in an Introduction to Ed Tech course, where it recognized very specific competencies that were developed or students were to achieve throughout that course. There are cross-curricular badges that begin to recognize things that are actually very difficult to capture, in this case, intercultural awareness. Right? How do students who take courses in multiple different fields, develop these competencies, but as an institution, it's rarely recognized officially. And so a badge offering a credential in that space provides a way to do that. There are co-curricular opportunities. These were badges developed by students, actually, as part of a career services initiative to help students develop better LinkedIn profiles. And so what these students did was they developed a set of rubrics around which they could evaluate a student's LinkedIn profile as they entered the job market. And this was an incredible project because the rubric got to a very detailed level where it would even assess what you're wearing in your profile picture. These kinds of ideas. And then there are your open curricular badges that begin to recognize different types of learning opportunities that are non-credit bearing. These are largely your MOOCs. So all told, what this allows us to do is not necessarily just kind of destroy everything and say, okay, we're just going to start over with badges, but rather it offers the opportunity to kind of retrofit this type of credentialing into an existing system. Right? What it requires us to do is think about what are the learning outcomes inside of those spaces. What are the learning outcomes even for a co-curricular activity? And then we can begin to recognize that. So for the students who are, for example, leading highly successful student organizations, how do they differentiate themselves from students who aren't? And then lastly, what we have to look at are the credentials that the students begin to earn as a result of this. And by and large part, we think about how do we find Waldo, right? And this is a complex problem because we need to identify where those Waldos are because they're unique. They are of themselves kind of a one-off. And so it provides that opportunity for students to differentiate themselves. But when we begin to think about one Waldo, we have to consider that actually it's one Waldo in like a sea of Waldos. So it's not necessarily a question of how do we recognize an entire mass of students, but how do we recognize one student and allow them to be unique and kind of say that the diversity of their learning was really the value, the nuance in how they learned. With that, thank you very much for your time this morning. Here's my contact information. If you have any further questions, I'm happy to take those. I'm not sure how much time we have. Yeah, I've got a question in the back. Uh-huh. Sure. So, and that's where, so this is probably one of the most complex questions to answer, mainly because it's fraught with nuance. So it's kind of rooted in this idea that nobody bought DVD players before there were DVDs, right? Same thing's been true with every media format over the history of mankind, that we don't use the thing that consumes them until we have a thing to consume. And so that's our key challenge right now, is the number of badges being issued has just not hit a critical mass yet, which is the value of these kinds of conversations, to say, okay, I see the instructional applications of this, so if we begin to apply this in terms of solving instructional challenges, then as a product of that, we can begin to solve kind of employment placement challenges as well. But this also has applications inside of students who pursue professional degrees or pursue graduate degrees or so on and so forth. So as it sits now, the value of the badge is really in the fact that it's captured this evidence. It's recognized this. And so there are so many certification programs that exist today that this is recognized much like a certification program would be. So you've earned some kind of certification or recognition in a particular area, and because it has the evidence that comes from the university, it's taken as true, right? Now, students can do this through a number of different ways, but the one that resonates most with students is that it can be linked to from their LinkedIn profile. And that's the interesting part. So when we first introduced badges to students, they were a little fuzzy. Okay, I get the idea. It's sort of like the Xbox thing I have at home. I get where you're going with this, but what's the real value? And you say, you can link to it from your LinkedIn account, and you're earning a badge that no one else has. I get that. Okay, that has specific value to me. And so many times it takes just actually describing it in that way. And that's for most students how they think about it. It's like, okay, that's how I manifest that. That's how I kind of carry that forward. Yeah?
I work for a new portfolio company. We're currently figuring out how to incorporate badges into our FGA and into presentation portfolios, as that's the digital type of portfolio that we would benefit from them. I don't know a lot about badges. I'm just starting to learn. I'd like to know, are badges, I have a couple parts of this, are badges recognizable as part of an institution? So if you gave one to your institution, would there be your Penn State logo on it somewhere so that people who see that know where it's coming from? Or is it like a metal link where I can click on it and see what this badge is, who it comes from?
Yeah, so it's more like a metal link. So they can be branded, and that's part of. So this is a much kind of shorter. Today is a much shorter explanation because there are a number of kind of core challenges around issuing badges, and branding is one of them, because that's where you have to think about institutionally what is an official badge, and that part of that is a key branding question. But part of it is that, so from a technology standpoint, the metadata in the badge links it back to the original issuer, and it has to for the badge to exist. So what that does is it makes it so you can't fake it. You couldn't just issue one on behalf of a university all by yourself, because as soon as you clicked on it, it wouldn't be able to send you back to the university to validate it.
So if I click, let's just say, for example, we work out our way and get a badge. We call it Gizmo, a tool that allows you to embed something into a page. So I embed my badge.
Sure.
If someone
Yeah.
clicks on that,
Yeah.
hopefully they'll know to do that.
Yeah.
Then they'll see, oh, this is from Penn State. These are the competencies that the student has.
Yes, absolutely. And all that metadata sits inside of that badge. So actually, you wouldn't even just, you could display it right there on the page, so you wouldn't even have to click on it. So all of that, so it's all metadata. So the anatomy of the badge itself includes who issued it and when it was issued and in these kinds of things. So you can drill into it to validate it, but if you just wanted to see the information, it's carried as data with the badge itself.
So how would that be displayed on the screen? That's the part I'm trying to...
So you would have, like, critical thinking badge, and then issued by university, issued on date, in satisfaction of these criteria, something like that. It would just be.
That would all be sitting right on the page.
Yeah. So in your case, you would be the displayer in this relationship, and so as displayer, you get that data, and you can choose how to display it. It works like an RSS feed.
Okay.
So you can just break down the feed, you pick out the pieces of it you want, and you display them however you want.
And if the person wanted to dig in a little bit deeper, they could
Click on it, drill them back into the original validator, the original issuer, and it would say, okay, here's the university that issued it, and here's the record to validate it. We had a question back over here. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Sure. So in that they're in. So there's, that's part. So the display technology is the piece right now that's really just beginning to be developed. So again, it kind of deals back with that issue of we haven't yet hit a critical mass in terms of the number of badges, so there's not enough investment in the displaying of them. And so that's where some people are doing it better than others. Some institutions, like at Penn State, we display them for our students so they can link back to their badges page and just display it that way. You can issue them to your Mozilla backpack, and then you can collect badges from multiple places and use your backpack as the way to display them. There are like WordPress plugins that you can draw them into a WordPress blog and display your badges there. So it depends on the delivery medium in terms of how they get displayed. But you're right, from LinkedIn's perspective, it's largely just you put a link on your profile that says, okay, here's my badge page, and then that would send you there. Because part of it is that from the student's perspective, they shouldn't want to display them all, right? So they'll earn a lot of these over the course of their learning. And just like their resume, you don't choose everything you ever did and put it on your resume. You choose the thing that paints the best picture of me based on what I'm trying to accomplish. And badges work the same way, is that I can choose which of these tells the best story of me that provides that evidence of learning and then allows me to share that with potential employers. And so that's where what you're finding is kind of the need space in there, which is thinking about from a display technology standpoint, what is the appropriate way to display these? And then from the question earlier about employment is how do people want to consume them? Because it's all data, they're mineable. That's the next part of it. So it's not necessarily one of those kind of quirky, weird things about, well, it's about how a machine read your resume. In this case, it's actually like structured data. So you can get down to, I want somebody who's learned this programming language from this faculty member in this time space or something like that. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Sure, and so in this case, the badge is more or less self-validating. Because it links back to the original issuer, and for it to exist, that piece has to be in there, and it can't really be forged. So as a person wanting to check it out, all you have to do is click on it and see where it sends you. And if it sends you back to the original issuer, in this case the institution, then you know that it's a real thing. If it sends you to, you click on it and it says, okay, it's issued by Bob's Muffler Shop, then, okay, I can evaluate that however I need to. So Mozilla has specified Mozilla has their Open Badges format, and so in this case, that's it's in the context of using that Open Badges metadata structure provided by Mozilla to offer that kind of interoperability. Yeah. You had a question? You can, and that's where we're talking from. No, it's a good question because it was the first question I asked, which is, okay, what prevents me from just issuing these at will? So again, it's that feedback loop. So you could issue it, and it would look authentic, but the second somebody clicked on it, you wouldn't be able to replicate that kind of link back to the original issuer. Does that make sense? Yes, anyone can. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right there. So it's a variety of applications. So we can look at curricular applications of it. We can look at again, co-curricular applications of it. So how do we begin to recognize students that are participating in different styles of activities as part of engaged scholarship programs. So as they're engaging in projects within their community or different types of research, there are badges that can be earned. So we're at the same stage kind of everyone else is in terms of kind of exploring how do we begin to do this? How do we begin? What are the right applications of it? Because like I mentioned before, the value in here is that we can retrofit this into existing environments. We're also looking at from the open education standpoint of how do students who are completing our MOOCs in different iterations, how do they take that and bring that forward as proof of prior learning? Yeah. In this case, I would describe it as organic. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering about the process for checking on the validity of the person who issues that. Like, is Mozilla doing something to really make sure that you are who you say you are and that you're affiliated with who you say you're affiliated with? Is someone taking that extra step, or is it just
Again, it gets back to how that gets linked back to the issuer. So the issuance, so yes, you can just independently choose to start issuing badges today, right now, right? But when somebody clicks to validate that badge, it's going to send them to you in whatever system you're issuing them from. And so it works very similar to how a diploma works. So if Mozilla doesn't issue them, you do. So Mozilla only provides the conduit through which to do it.
So if someone wanted to check that validity, they could go and look at
They would have to go directly. So if you wanted, it's the same thing as a diploma. You want to validate a diploma, the only way to do it is call the institution. You can photocopy them all day long, but that doesn't make it possible to call the institution and validate it.
So just like looking at the diploma, the person who's responsible for doing that check would be the person who is considering that badge as something that's worth earning.
Yeah, and then, but part of it is that the value in there is also that these badges may not be issued by institutions. So if, you got a badge from Stephen Hawking, right, that has a certain value to it, right? So that's where you get into these interesting pieces, and that's part of what we see now are badges being issued by Stack Overflow. Anybody familiar with Stack Overflow? It's like this community of geeks that exchange kind of question and answers over programming issues, right? Earning the highest level badges in Stack Overflow will get you job offers, plain and simple, right? It's happened time and time again. And these aren't issued by any institution. It's just a community of developers that kind of share information. Any other questions? Well, again, thank you very much for your time this morning. If you need anything else, please let me know.